Coming up on Tech News Today, the U.S. could require foreign visitors to cough up their social media passwords upon entry. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, Apple sets the record straight on its Mac Pro lineup and what to expect in the coming year. Pokemon Go developers Niantic are targeted in a number of trespassing lawsuits, and how Twitter bots made one man a popular political pundit. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1739, recorded Tuesday, April 4th, 2017. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. When it comes to the big decision of choosing a mortgage lender, work with one that has your best interest in mind. Use Rocket Mortgage for a transparent, trustworthy home loan process that's completely online at quickenloans.com/TNT.
And by Tracker, a coin-sized tracking device that pairs with your smartphone and keeps you from losing your most valued possessions. Visit thetracker.com right now and enter the promo code TNT to receive a free Tracker Bravo with any purchase. Hello and welcome to Tech News Today, the show where we talk with some of the biggest, we talk about some of the biggest and best news stories, the stuff you really need to know, and with some of the people who are the most passionate about technology. I'm Nathan Olivares-Giles.
And I'm Jason Howe. How's it going, Nate?
Great, yeah. I'm filling in for Megan today. Yeah. She's out sick. But
haven't really heard from her today, which is a good thing. Hopefully that means she's just resting.
I hope it means she's resting up. But
passed out.
Yeah, but always a good time being on the show.
Yeah, right on. It's great to have you here. When we first came in here, it was like, because you had done the show with Megan so many times.
I did it like
you were
like
over
a week
here.
in 2 days. Yeah.
So this might throw you off, being on the other side of the table.
Hey, either side, I can handle it.
Unfortunately, it's like a hot potato.
Yeah, we can make it work.
All right, let's do it. Top story today, changes are afoot as relates to U.S. government access to the technology that's toted by foreigners as they enter the country. A number of measures are being considered currently as part of President Trump's promise of, quote, extreme vetting for visitors that would possibly include forced disclosure of phone contacts as well as the passwords of their social media accounts. Obviously they're doing this from the perspective of wanting to know the connections, the relationships of the people who are asking to enter the country with those, in their contacts list, in their social media accounts, their perspectives there to know whether, they would, they have, intention to harm.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of a slippery slope. I understand the argument that we want to keep Americans as safe as possible. So anyone who's applying for a visa, potentially coming into the country, we need to know as much about them as we can. I understand that argument, and to a certain extent, I sympathize with it. But right now, and we actually, maybe like a week or so ago, had Brian X. Chen from the New York Times. He had a column about this very issue and basically what all of us can do to protect our data as we cross international borders, and it's definitely something people should check out and read. But right now, essentially, you don't have to give up this information. Is the general rule? Although oftentimes border officials will ask you to do so. The reason why I think this is kind of a slippery slope is if we start asking immigrants and visa holders to give these things over, how long before we start saying, okay, we need that from even American citizens. We need that from everyone. So I think there are also other ways to get this information. I mean, if you just look at our presence on social media, you're going to see who we're interacting with. You're going to see who we're following. You're going to see who our contacts are. Yeah. The fact of the matter is all of that kind of data does exist out there in lots of different places. And especially now that they can get data from our ISPs and all these sorts of things, like they're going to get all the data on who we're communicating with anyways. I don't know if this is totally necessary.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, potentially expanding this to include American citizens, let's say. At the same time, new legislation has been introduced to limit what law enforcement can do when an American is entering the country. The bill would ensure that Border Patrol agents couldn't search phones belonging to U.S. citizens without a warrant or to turn them away if they refuse to comply. And you mentioned also that that is an option. Like, you're not forced, you're not required to hand over this information. Of course, the flip side of that for, let's say, foreigners who refuse to do this is
you don't get in the country.
They don't get in the country. They get sent back out, you know. And I think the one question that I had about this is, you know, you mentioned slippery slope. I'm wondering if it's just a bit overbroad in the sense that it affects so many other things. Like it's in the guise, and it's the stated goal to protect the U.S. You know, in this regard. But it can also affect a lot of other things: tourism, trade, research, education. All of these reasons that people come into the country, and if a lot of that, you know, is persuaded to stop because of rules like this. That affects the economy.
It affects
the US economy.
Every aspect of what makes the United States what it is, right? From the talent that we have in our universities to, you know, in our hospitals to in our workplaces, and it's every single aspect. And so this is just like, it feels like every week there's some new thing that's coming out that's being targeted towards immigrants. That is, of course, you know, obviously creating a public dialogue that is very necessary to have, that we should all be taking part in and asking ourselves, you know, what do we need to keep ourselves safe, and what is important to us? What are our values? We're kind of at one of those inflection points.
For sure.
So this isn't a conversation that we should be afraid of. And to a certain extent, I think, you know, it might be good to throw all these sorts of ideas on the table, simply because the data exists out there, and we need to have very clear answers over what's okay and what isn't, right? And the fact of the matter is that in the past, it hasn't always been clear. One of the things that we've seen in stories in the past is, you know, like, you know, judges and Border Patrol agents can't force you to give over a PIN code or a password, but they can compel people to actually use their fingers for fingerprint readers. So a lot of privacy advocates say to turn off the fingerprint reader before you cross. So, you know, all this technology, while it's been around for a little while, our laws haven't necessarily caught up to it. So, you know, really, in order to iron some of these things out, we have to have some of these ideas, which might be bad ideas, introduced just so we can have the conversation and have a real legal answer as to what's okay and what's not.
That's a really good point.
Well, in a really unusual move, Apple invited a handful of tech reporters down to its Cupertino headquarters to talk about the Mac. Apple's marketing chief, Phil Schiller, told reporters, quote, "We are in the process of what we call completely rethinking the Mac Pro," end quote. Schiller said that next year, Apple will finally release a successor to the current Mac Pro, which has largely been unchanged since its release in December 2013.
As a device that looked like a trash can.
Yeah, and I have one of these. I love it. I love the look.
You have one of these?
Yeah, but it's a little old in the tooth here. The company is also working on a new standalone display, which is interesting because they gave up on making displays after the last Thunderbolt display. And these new devices will all be built with modularity in mind, as well as quicker hardware updates. So hopefully, Mac Pro owners like myself won't be stranded for years without performance increases, which has been the case. So if you're a Pro user and a Mac user, this might be good news for you. But you know, at the same time, it's been so long since they've done anything with the Mac Pro. I gotta wonder, like, should we trust Apple on this?
I know, right? It has been a long time. I'm way out of date at this point. I have a Mac Pro from 2008, which I have to say, like, I have it maxed out on RAM. It's totally sufficient. Like, I use it for audio production with Pro Tools, and so I'm putting the processor to its, you know, through its paces.
You're on the edges there.
I'm using it to its fullest, but it's still, you know, it's kind of aging at this point. I've never been interested in upgrading to the current model of Mac Pro. Just the new kind of design format being kind of limited to only Thunderbolt for expansion really seemed like a big downside for me. Maybe you get used to it. What do you use that Mac Pro for? Like, why did you get that?
Yeah, so I do some illustrations and things like that. I did a little emoji app with a colleague at the Wall Street Journal last year, and also some video editing. So a lot of Final Cut Pro.
Video editing, you see it. You see it, you know, if it's out of date and it's slow and needs updating, that's when you
and
really
it definitely, you know, so when it comes to things like video editing, when it comes to like graphic design and illustrations, and now things I'm not doing like architecture, you know, there are all sorts of different professional needs, a lot of creative pros, and you know, really rely on these machines and depend on these machines for their livelihood.
Right.
You know, I'm not doing these sorts of things where I'm editing, you know, video on a daily basis or anything like that. but a lot of folks that I know who are film editors, who are making music videos and movies, you know, they're stuck on some of this old hardware, and so they've moved over to laptops, which I know Apple would be pretty happy about. But I know a lot of folks have also just left Apple altogether and moving over to Windows. Now, one of the things that Apple said it would not do here is add in touchscreens on any of these new Macs. Phil Schiller said it's not a big need of the Mac Pro customers that we're trying to address. So, you know, Microsoft has that big new Surface Studio.
Right there,
yeah, and they're not making one of those, which I think might be a bit of a letdown for some people who wanted that.
Especially because you have to imagine there's at least some pressure for them to be this outward and you know, open on talking about this, from the fact that Microsoft had really this past year really did roll out products that do address the professionals and the you know, the creative professional market. Largely, it's the first time that I've seen a Microsoft announcement for hardware that I've been like, gosh, maybe I should check that out, because I could really see myself, you know, enjoying that aspect of that interface, you know, being able to pull down the big touch screen and control my, you know, my audio software with a hands-on sort of approach.
Yeah, it's really nice to use. One of the things that bothers me about the Surface Studio is that it doesn't have a dedicated graphics card. So it's not as powerful of a machine as I'd like. And to be honest, with a lot of the things that I wanted to do with it, given its price point, it wasn't as powerful as I wanted. Also, and I know this is very niche, it can't run a VR headset. So like, I own an Oculus Rift, and you know, if I'm going to spend a lot of money on a PC that's taking up a lot of space, I want to at least be able to
absolutely,
you know, I don't want to have any limitations here. So hopefully Apple comes through with that new Mac Pro as soon as possible next year and does something great with it. We'll see. But in the meantime, it says Apple's saying that they're going to release a upgraded iMac this year. Now, they didn't say how much more powerful that will be over the existing option that's available. But you know, that's a bit, I guess, of like a holdover. They also offered a slight spec bump for the current Mac Pro, that beautiful trash can. It was introduced today. And so basically for $3,000, you'll now get a 6-core instead of a quad-core processor. At the $4,000 price point, you'll get an 8-core processor instead of a 6-core. So, you know, okay, that's fine. But I actually want to get back to the Thunderbolt thing you were talking about. Their new laptops have nothing but USB-C on them. And I know a lot of people were infuriated because that would mean having to use a lot of dongles. I'm actually okay. I'm about that dongle life. I'm all right with that. But the new Mac Pro doesn't have all those USB-Cs. So it's almost like, listen, if you're gonna, you know, if you're gonna do like a 0.5 update, give me all the USB-Cs. If that's the future, if you're telling me that's where it's all going, you know, why not at least do that? And they aren't even doing that there. So I'm interested to see what the I/O is going to look like for this Mac Pro next year. Yeah,
and I mean, he even spelled out, like, we're not doing any major design change here. It's literally taking the insides and upgrading them a little bit, because it's the holdover. I wonder how many people jump on these now when you know that. I mean, Apple's basically already told you their roadmap, which they don't do very often.
No, they don't do that very often.
They've told you there's something right around the corner. You still don't know when that's going to happen. But, I mean, if you've waited this long, do you...
I feel like you got to wait.
Yeah, you got to wait.
You have to wait. You know, I honestly, if you're looking to buy a new Mac Pro, I'd almost be checking eBay to see if anyone's going to be unloading those machines in anticipation of what's coming next year, rather than going to an Apple store and buying something that you know is going to be outdated within a few months. Now, there was a bit of an apology in some of the reports. There was a great report from Matt Panzarino at TechCrunch, and there was a quote from Phil Schiller saying, "If we had a pause in upgrades and updates on that, we're sorry for that. What happened with the Mac Pro, and we're going to come out with something that's great to replace it. That's our intention." So kind of almost an apology, not quite.
About as much of an apology as you get from Apple.
As you're going to get from Apple. So, you know, if that makes you feel any better, then there's that too.
They really needed to appeal to the professional. I think the dialogue amongst professionals and creatives for a while now, you know, I mean, and this isn't just hardware, you know, they did the same thing when they switched from Final Cut, you know, to Final Cut X, where professionals felt like they were left in the dust. And it was like the growing dialogue for for professionals and creatives has just been that, oh man, Apple just doesn't really care much anymore. They're really appealing to the the everyday user, and so at least here they're saying, wait a minute, we hear you. We promise we're doing something. We promise we're working for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because one of the things that Apple has really touted for a long time is its really focused product lineup, right? The way Steve Jobs used to talk about it was the quadrant, right? If we only made 4 products, it'd be super simple and we'd have something for everybody and we could put our A team on all of it or something like that, right? I'm paraphrasing here. But with the Pro side, Final Cut 10, it got really great over time. It's fantastic software today. Now you can actually edit like a full feature film on it.
Right.
But it took a long time to get there.
And it was hard to see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. And in the process of it taking so long to get where it really should have been at launch, they lost a lot of folks who went over to Adobe Premiere, who went over to Avid. A lot of professionals, that I know who work in that industry gave up on Apple at that point. Now, Microsoft, like you said, has been killing it on the creative end with their hardware. And I'm sure that Apple is losing some folks again in this process. So, one of the things that they're promising to do with these updates next year is just be quicker on the upgrades. And they really need to do that because it's as if they're just really giving their own market away by being so damn slow. Right. And yeah, okay, great. Granted, they make they got the Apple TV and they got the Apple Watch and they got a lot of side hustles these days, right? But they still don't have that many core products. You got the Mac, you got the iPhone and the iPad. So I don't know what's going on with the A team on the Mac, but it's interesting that they brought all these reporters in. There was the pressure from the pro community. There was also pressure from tech punditry and journalists and think pieces saying, hey, Apple's slipping here. So it's an encouraging sign to me to see that they take it serious enough to have one of these kind of awkward, very rare, on the record conversations to say, listen, we're listening. Good stuff is on the way. It's almost a way of saying, stick with us. Like we know we messed up. Stick with us. But they really got to deliver here.
Yeah, exactly. The proof's in the pudding. So we'll see when they get around to releasing that. And you thought Pokemon Go was last year's news. Federal judge is near a decision on whether the massively popular, if only for one magical summer, augmented reality game violated the law by sending players onto the private property of New Jersey, Florida, and Michigan residents, at least to start. Game mechanics place virtual game elements on their property, bringing large crowds in some cases of gamers into the area. The rulings could set precedent for whether developers are on the hook for the behavior of its players, especially as we enter this world of augmented, reality and games that actually take you outside of your house, move you off of your couch and into the real world. How does that interplay, and who's responsible when someone crosses the line, literally?
It's a really great question, and we're seeing a lot more these days of the things that you do digitally and online having these real world implications. Now, on a very extreme case, we had issues where a journalist, saw some images on Twitter that triggered a seizure, and the person who sent those out was actually facing legal consequences for that. In that case, it was not Twitter's fault. It was the person who sent that out. So I'd be interested to see here if in this case, is it on you as to where you go and what you do, or is it on Pokemon Go and that app to tell you where to go and how to react? It's pretty interesting stuff. And it really just kind of is the latest example of how, the real world implications really do matter here.
Yeah.
This isn't a game, so to speak, right?
Right. Well, and the game, is placing these elements in places and influencing how people arrive there in hordes, not following regular real life rules, but following the rules of the game. In South Florida, it was a 62-unit apartment complex that I guess was overwhelmed by Pokemon goers, illegal parking, public urination in some cases. It was like, well, it's late night and we're hunting Pokemon, but here we go. New Jersey, plaintiff says at least 5 players knocked on their door to gain backyard access, to which I said, well, at least they knocked.
Yeah, rather than just bursting down.
In Michigan, a nearby park was overcome by players who blocked driveways. Sounds like a theme. Unwanted foot traffic on private property that surrounded the area. I mean, especially when the game catches fire the way Pokemon Go did there for a while, you're talking big numbers of people.
Yeah, these are real concerns. In San Francisco, the house that was used in the TV show Full House, there's always people up and down that block any time of day, it seems like, who want to go and take pictures. And on all the houses nearby, you see signs that they've posted themselves saying, don't block my driveway, don't stand in front of my house, no pictures, whatever. I wonder if it might end up in something like that, where it's like, listen, we know there's going to be a Pokemon gym next door. Like, don't hang out here. Like, what sort of things will I have to do? But a lot of these rules, I guess, would vary state by state too. That's kind of something that would be called into question here. So
for sure,
something that happens in Florida might not necessarily happen elsewhere. But Niantic is saying, the developer of the game is saying, that there could be a bit of a ripple effect for other apps, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it could, exactly. It could affect things even outside of like games. It could be, depending on how these rulings happen, it could extend out to pretty much anything where you're using the internet, for location-based information, like real estate listings, for example, finding a house that's on the market in the area, like decisions based on this could potentially reach out to those other places. One thing we know is that Niantic's other game, Ingress, did not produce these these types, or at least this level of complaints. So
yeah, it's popular and it has a very passionate audience, but it's not Pokemon popular. That's for sure.
Burkchat says, it should always be that the person is held responsible. I would likely agree with that. And Burke thinks people are stupid. I wouldn't make that sweeping claim necessarily, Burke, but I'm happy that you did.
Twitter is reportedly in talks with pay TV broadcasters to expand its ongoing live video push. The Telegraph reported Tuesday that Twitter is trying to complete deals with the likes of Sky, BT, and ESPN so that those who already have subscriptions to those networks would be able to link their subscriptions with their Twitter account and then watch those channels inside of Twitter's own app. Twitter has signed live streaming deals with the NFL, Wimbledon, and Cheddar in the past, and signing deals directly with these networks and maybe even pay TV providers could get Twitter access to programming that it currently doesn't have the rights to, like European soccer games, which many Twitter users tweet about while watching on their TV sets. So what do you think about this, Jason? It seems like kind of the next place to go. If you want to bring TV to Twitter, why not just go to TV and make the deal there, right?
Well, especially because Twitter as a platform it's a really strong platform for kind of shared viewing experiences in general. Twitter realized this, at least before last year, when it started to kind of strike the deals with the NFL and Wimbledon to kind of bring itself closer to video content through the app. Yeah. I mean, when a major viewing experience is happening, let's say the season premiere of Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah,
Twitter is alive.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And if you're tapped into that, it's definitely
can make it more fun.
Better experience when you're watching something.
Yeah, I have friends in LA who I tweet with about Laker games and Dodger games and all sorts of sports stuff like that. During the debates, of course, Twitter was lively last year.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And so it seems like a smart way to key in on this. I'm kind of hoping that they'll eventually do something to make the presentation a little better, though, because there's the Apple TV app where you can see some tweets, and then watching the video with like a scrolling text below. It just, none of it gives me as much text and as much screen as I want. I feel like I'm compromising on one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of locks you into that. I feel the same way when if I pull up a YouTube video, I'm more inclined to switch it to the side so that I get all the really big video.
Exactly.
But then there's other stuff down below, and even when you're scrolling, the video stays affixed there. So it's nice, but it's not ideal.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it better to just have a full screen Twitter on your phone and be watching the screen on the TV the way people did back in the olden days?
Back in the old days, like months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I kind of still like being lazy and laid out on my couch with my phone, potentially falling on my face, and then what I'm watching on the big screen. But I guess it's good to have the option.
Yeah, for sure.
It is not clear, though, in these stories that have come out, how close this is all to being a real finalized deal, how close Twitter is to making this official. So maybe the talks are early, maybe they're mid-stage, maybe they're late. We're not quite sure. But this seems to kind of make sense.
Yeah, and especially like you mentioned Apple TV, you know, some of the TV, like on the phone, that's one thing. Bringing that into their app experience on the TV platforms, that's where it actually makes a lot more sense to me. The fact that people are already using their TV to watch content, to have a little bit of that kind of augmented Twitter feed in the experience while they're watching. Although I've never actually done that. Like I've never actually sat down and done that. I've just read reviews, and we've talked to people on this show when that app was rolling out and it was enabling that. Is that a good viewing experience? Because you kind of have to jump through some hoops in order to participate in it, right?
Yeah, it's not the best. It still feels like there's not enough just direct, you know, like there's too many hurdles to go through to get there. So they obviously still need to work on that. And I do kind of wonder if this will be enough to, you know, I don't want to say save Twitter, but obviously we know it's a company that is in a lot of positions of struggle, right? Yeah. They need new revenue streams. They're trying to figure things out. They have this like massive troll problem that doesn't seem to go away. But this all seems to be just kind of making a little bit better and improving a little bit something that we're already doing, which is watching TV and tweeting at the same time. Right. So in some sense, I wonder if this is enough.
Right. Yeah. Twitter playing to its strengths and you know, it certainly, I guess, couldn't hurt. Whether it will really help long term remains to be seen. Twitch, the game streaming site owned by Amazon, announced that it will be offering a way for viewers of game streams to click through to the shopping site, Amazon, to purchase the game that they're watching. Around 50 games and add-ons will be offered for purchase during the streams of those games, with 5% of the sales that are generated on those channels going directly to the Twitch streamers who motivated the sale. And I mean, when we talked about this a little bit earlier, I was like, God, I'm really surprised that didn't happen already. I mean, Amazon, the massive e-commerce, you know, site and behemoth that it is, owning Twitch already, like this seems like a match made in heaven as far as like kind of, you know, corralling those sales and through both platforms.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's kind of a no-duh move. You know, I think it should actually work out quite well for them, because if you're really into that game as you're watching people play it, and as a gamer, I oftentimes do go to Twitch to see what it looks like to play a game before I buy it. And then usually I have to like get out of the app, and then I'm going into the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store or whatever it might be, Steam, all these different things. So to remove that seems like it would just make these purchases almost like you know, you're about to be in the checkout aisle and you see like bag of candy in the last second, right? Yeah, the impulse buy. So especially if there's like a deal. I mean, a lot of times I'll buy games. I'll like wait for some games to come down. It's like, you know, this isn't like totally at the top of my list. I know I'm going to want to play in the next few months. Like, let's see if it comes down in price. So this being tied to promotions, I mean, this really feels like this could be smart.
And great for creators, right? What I wonder is, will this, like this obviously incentivizes creators to do more streaming of certain games. Like, does this change the content at all, or change kind of their efforts and how they stream to their channel if now suddenly they're motivated by selling games?
I feel like it has to. I mean, I've been seeing some really cool stuff on Twitch recently with some developers that I follow. And, you know, they're actually going through their development process, and they're showing you the games early on. And then this isn't necessarily a new thing, but people have been linking it to Patreon accounts, and they're saying, hey, I'm making this game now if you like what I'm doing. So folks are already using Twitch to get their audience to make that next step and to support what they're doing. So being able to say, hey, if you like this game right now, I made this, or I worked on it, or I did the music or the art or whatever, or I'm just a big fan and an evangelist for the game, or whatever it might be, then go buy it. Now's the time, or something like that. So I feel like that, you know, that's going to happen. That has to happen, because people are already using Twitch in this way. It's just they're directing people outside of Amazon's own stores, and given that Amazon is a retailer, you know.
Yeah, capture those sales, especially when you have a captive audience like you do with people who are watching those feeds or those streams on Twitch. And by the way, now would be a good time to do that. They're offering a bunch of incentives, free Twitch crates, which sound like little doodads, random rewards, chat badges, emotes. You probably know better what those things are, but also
a lot of digital goodies. It's fun.
Basically, and free entry into a drawing like a recurring drawing of prize packs and stuff. So if you're going to try it, that's motivation to try it now, I suppose.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think those little extras definitely will lure in gamers. I mean,
and get them used to the process.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Makes sense.
Up next, an illustration of how powerful Twitter can be when someone enlists the help of Twitter robots. But first, let's take a minute to thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. They're the sponsor of this episode. If you've gone through the mortgage process in the past, it probably involved a lot of like real time, pulling of information from files and going into your filing cabinet and having to be on location to do all this stuff with someone in the room. And I mean, times have changed. We live in a digital age right now. When it comes to the big decision of choosing a mortgage lender, you also want to work with someone who has your trust, who has your best interest in mind. And with Rocket Mortgage, you're going to get a transparent online process that gives you the confidence to make an informed decision, and you're going to do it all online. You don't have to spend your time in person, searching through stacks of actual paperwork to find the information that you need. With Rocket Mortgage, you can securely share your financial information to get a mortgage approval in minutes online. You can even adjust the rate and the length of your loan, play around with those numbers in real time to kind of tweak it and make sure that you get the mortgage solution that's right for you. So whether you're looking to buy a home or even refinance your existing mortgage, you can lift the burden of getting a home with Rocket Mortgage. So skip the bank, skip the waiting, go completely online at quickenloans.com/TNT. That's quickenloans.com/TNT, equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS consumeraccess.org, number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support.
Aaron Sankin of Reveal News joins us today to chat about a fascinating story he wrote about one man who basically gamed Twitter to essentially build himself into a political pundit. Aaron, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, so let's just get into it. Walk us through the story. You wrote about a man named Jim Vidmar, who was basically a social media consultant, and last year during the U.S. presidential campaign deployed bots to basically juice up his engagement numbers and even propel his tweets into trending status. Is that right?
Yeah. So essentially what had happened was, at the time, I was doing some reporting and working with a social media analytics firm called Spreadfast. And we were looking at each of the tweets that were coming out of each of the debates. This was during kind of the later stages of the presidential primaries. And we kind of noticed, in looking through kind of the top tweets that had the most retweets and had a lot of engagements, that there was an account called Politics Jim that was really dominating a lot of these kind of top trending hashtags around the debates, and it was getting 6, 7, 8 of the top tweets. And that was something that I found really interesting, because generally those top tweets they usually come from politicians. They would come from people like Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, or possibly comedians like Patton Oswalt or Trevor Noah. But this was someone that kind of came out of nowhere. So I started digging around a little bit and discovered that a lot of his followers were bots. Kind of 2/3 of his follower numbers were bots. And then I dug around a little and then reached out and kind of asked him, like, what's going on? What are you trying to do here? And the story that he told me was really interesting was that he's kind of a longtime social media consultant. He had, been doing marketing for a long time. And in late 2015, he had sold a couple of kind of small startups and got a little bit of savings and had some time on his hands finally, after kind of working to the grindstone in the Twitter mines for a number of years, and decided that he was going to try to become a political pundit. And, what I found really interesting about this effort, some of the things that he was doing, is that he really approached this kind of with a kind of hacker mindset, where, traditionally political pundits are people who rose up through the ranks of politics. You're James Carville or someone like that, someone who's been a politician or a political consultant, or you have someone who's a journalist and they really kind of work their way up through the ranks of news. But, this guy, what he had done was, he saw that these conversations were happening on Twitter, and he saw that this is how the modern media ecosystem worked. And he was like, I can just kind of hack this system. I can insert my commentary and my memes and my opinions to the top of this stack and get what I'm doing seen by more people. Eventually, after a few months, Twitter caught on and suspended his account, and he kind of was like, I think I'm done with this. But I think what's really interesting about it is that he had with kind of a pretty clear view and understanding of how the modern media ecosystem works and how it's largely dependent on a lot of these social media platforms, and that if you understand how the platforms work and if you use their algorithms and their systems to your advantage, you can kind of bend them to your will a bit. And I think that's something that we saw in another way with Trump himself.
So you mentioned a few moments ago about verifying these bots. How exactly do you verify that? I know I've seen bots on Twitter. I'm sure everybody has seen obvious bots on Twitter. But when you're talking about the numbers that you're talking about that were lifting this guy up, how do you verify all those bots that they are those?
So there are some systems. There's a website called TwitterAudit.com that does a pretty good job of, you can plug in any account and it can look at its followers and determine, just in a general ballpark sense, how many of them are bots. I think what's actually getting a little difficult is in kind of the world of bot identification, you're seeing it become trickier to determine if some things are bots, where you have some accounts that are bots some of the time, and other portions of the time they're operated by human beings. And you have, the bots themselves are getting more sophisticated and and harder to identify. And that's something that I know a lot of researchers who are working in kind of looking at the political uses of Twitter bots are trying to kind of suss out and figure out at the moment. The only way you can really tell what's a bot and what's a human is to look at its activity. If something is tweeting, 700, 800 times a day, it's probably a bot. If there are 300 accounts all tweeting the exact same thing at the exact same time, they're probably bots. But if these programs are doing things that deviate from that norm, even a portion of the time, it's more difficult.
So what was Jim's ultimate goal with all this? You mentioned that he wanted to get on some television programs, cable news, but was he actually trying to build a career, or was he just kind of trolling and having fun?
I think it was closer to someone just kind of having fun. I think in my conversations with Jim, what he was doing was he was like, it would be cool to, be a talking head on TV. And he has political opinions and he would like to share them. But I don't think that he was kind of actively trying to sell himself as a product. And that was one of the things that he mentioned to me in one of our conversations, was that, it was easier for him to do this because he wasn't selling a product. He wasn't getting, his tweets weren't getting as flagged as often. They weren't getting reported as often as when bots are kind of obviously shilling for a product. Maybe, if you see a Twitter account and it's clearly a robot trying to sell you some sketchy prescription medication, you're probably more likely to report it. But if you're seeing something and they're just kind of tweeting out political memes, maybe you're not as likely to report that. And that was what he noticed, is that his ability to do this was easier than he had done before in the marketing sense, simply because he wasn't as obviously trying to sell something.
Your story actually mentions that now our president, Donald Trump, at the time candidate, had something like 6 million followers who were believed to be bots. Who else is using bots on purpose or not as followers, and to what ends?
So there are a lot of different people using bots, and I think it's kind of important to kind of separate what's going on with all the bots who are following Donald Trump. And so he does have a lot of bots, but it's also a lot of just human beings follow Trump as well. So if you look at botnets and what they're doing, you'll see that a lot of these botnets are following Trump, and some of them will be, tweeting out some of this kind of pro-Trump kind of alt-right propaganda. But at the same time, a lot of those same bot networks will also be tweeting out marketing stuff. So I think if you have a botnet and the primary reason that you're using that botnet is for marketing and is to, make some money for your marketing clients, to follow a very, very popular person who generates a lot of activity with each and every tweet, and tweeting out what Donald Trump says in articles about Donald Trump, that's a good way to kind of blend in with the crowd, because that's what I do as a reporter. That's what millions of people around the world do when they're using Twitter. They're talking about Trump and they're reacting about politics. So I think there's kind of this commingling of those two things. And I think it's easy to kind of want to tie all these things together into one kind of large overarching conspiracy of, there are Russian botnets and they're working to elect Donald Trump. But I think you also have to see that what's going on in a very large sense is also a lot about marketing and people using these tools to make some money.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't just isolated to Twitter either. It seems like this is a greater problem around social media in general, is that, it can be very difficult to know exactly who is behind that username. Is it a real person or is it not? Has it been cleverly programmed to seem like a real person? It's like we're living this perpetual Turing test in social media, which makes me kind of ask the question about social networks in general. If this is such a huge fault of them, is this like the replacement for aerial propaganda leaflets of days old? You know what I mean? Like, it's such a great way to spread a message and make sure that just through sheer network effect, make sure that it distributes itself down the line, and it may have not even come from an actual person.
And I think one of the other things that when I spoke to Jim, one of his comments, which I think is also kind of right on, is that just because you have a network of bots that are tweeting out a particular message or tweeting out a particular article or particular image, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to resonate particularly strongly.
Yeah, that's true.
At the end of the day, if there's a piece of content and the only people who like it enough to retweet it are robots, you're not going to get that far, because there aren't human beings interacting with that content. So robots can get you a few steps up on the ladder, but at the same time, the content itself has to resonate with people where they're going to spread it also. And kind of even more important than that, spreading a piece of content or an idea or a meme, it only matters as much as it affects people's thoughts and opinions and behaviors. Yeah. So if you have one of those, if you have bots spreading a message and it connects to people, and then those people then tweet it out or read it, what really matters is that they internalize that message, because you're really at the end of the day, social networks are just spreading information from person to person, and everything that happens on them are tools to do that. And some seem more natural and legitimate, and some may seem kind of sketchy, but ultimately, it's just one person's connection to another.
Mm-hmm. So we're obviously talking about that all this through the lens of politics, but your story also mentions that there are some roots in this in online gambling. Take us through a little bit of where this all got started and where else bots are being used.
Oh yeah. So one of the things that he had done initially was he had kind of created a system, back in the late 90s, to let people cheat at poker, which was, it's a system that sits on top of your video poker apps and then lets you count cards. And kind of that he had created this thing, and he was like, this is a super cool product, but it's not going to matter, and people aren't going to buy it and use it if they can't, if they don't know about it. So that was his kind of initial foray into being like, I need to think about marketing. And since he already really kind of thought like a hacker, of someone who was ready to build around technical systems and try to figure out the cracks in them, try to, bend them to his will, and kind of combining that with an idea of what marketing is, and trying to spread a message. That's kind of where the genesis point of where a lot of this came from.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. Really appreciate your time. Where can people find you and your work online?
Yeah, so you can find my work at revealnews.org. And you can also follow me on Twitter at asenken.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I guess we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks
Aaron.
a lot.
Appreciate it. Have a good night. All right, feedback time. C. Brian Jones actually sent us a tweet storm of his thoughts on Amazon Cash. So we got a few tweets in here. So I'll just kind of read what he said in tandem. He said, what Amazon is doing with Cash Option has been available for Amazon in Japan for decades. This is available for almost all online shopping in Japan, which is still a largely cash-based society. We order on Amazon, choose pay at convenience store, go to 7-Eleven, etc., and enter the code into the kiosk. Then you get a printed slip, take it to the register, pay cash. They stamp it as a receipt. A little bit of a process there, but hey, it works in Japan, so why not here?
It's nice to see experimentation. You know, I often don't carry cash on me. In fact, I like pay for everything digitally, like all my bills and stuff. I don't even have a checkbook. So it's kind of cool to see these different processes. And yeah, if you look at things that are happening in Japan and Europe, like they kind of seem to be a little bit more cutting edge than we got going here. So it's interesting that he brought that up.
Yeah. They start a lot of things over there, and then we're like, oh, that's crazy. That's silly talk. And then like 5-10 years later,
we jump on that
it's
train.
Like, whoa, this is the new crazy thing. Everybody's doing it. It's like, yeah, they've been doing it for a really long time.
Yeah, I love to see it. I love to see it.
And speaking of merged company names, he continued, 2 convenience stores in Japan, Family Mart, plus Sunkiss formed a new holding company, and the name they chose, FU, or FU. Apparently they hate HD because the website is fu-hd.com. Well, that was a funny addendum, but
I think it's hilarious.
There you go. All right. Thanks for tweeting that out. Appreciate it.
Well, Yik Yak is reportedly on the market, but first, let's take a minute to thank Tracker, the sponsor of this episode. They're not under the couch, in the cupboard, or on the table. Your meeting is in 20 minutes and you can't find your keys. We've all been there. I definitely feel like I'm there way too often. But now with Tracker, you never have to worry about losing things again. The Tracker Bravo is a coin-sized device constructed with anodized aluminum for the thinnest, most durable tracking. You can find misplaced keys, wallets, bags, computers in seconds. Just pair the Tracker to your smartphone, attach the Tracker to any item, and then find its precise location with a tap of a button. It's that easy. Lost your phone? Press the button on your Tracker or ask your Amazon Echo and your phone rings even when it's on silent. Your phone can track up to 10 devices at once. You can customize two-way separation alerts so you're notified before you leave your item behind, which is super helpful. And with more than 4.5 million devices shipped, Tracker is the largest crowd GPS network in the world. So your lost item shows up on a map even if it's miles away. The Tracker app records its last known location. When another Tracker user comes within 100 feet of your item, you will receive a GPS update of where your item is located. And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's really no reason not to give this a try. Stop losing your stuff today. Go to thetracker.com and enter in the promo code TNT, and you'll get a free Tracker Bravo with any order. That's TheTracker.com. And again, that promo code is TNT for your free Tracker Bravo with any order. TNT's fan of the day is Bob Bryla on Twitter, who sent us this picture saying that he listens to TNT, quote, on my LG Sport Watch. Jason says it's too big. At Megan Maroney says it's too round. At Nate OG, help me out here. And I got to say,
what do you think?
You know, I really like that watch. I don't mind the size, but the sides are a little stiff because that version has like antennas built into it so it can work on its own. Yep. So I'm with you on the size. I'm with you on the look and the styling, but I'm not a fan of the stiff sides. So I have my own complaint for you. I wish I could help you out more. But nonetheless,
the bands are kind of inflexible.
They're a little stiff.
Like,
but I'm actually cool with the size, and I do like the style. I mean, it looks kind of rugged, albeit big. But hey, big watches are kind of in right now.
Yeah, that works.
Big watches are a thing. Yep. So I dig it. I dig it. And thanks for watching. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself and your setup and post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT, and we're going to find it.
Woody in chat says, too round? Because that was Megan's complaint.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's too round. I think her complaint is that it's round at all. And Megan is a firm believer that smartwatches need to be rectangular or square, and that round doesn't work.
I like the choice. I like the option. You know, I like give the people what they want. If you don't want a round one, don't buy a round one.
Now we'll see how things change if Apple comes out with a round one. Do you think that'll ever happen?
I think it could happen eventually. Yeah. I think it could happen. I mean, you know, like if smartwatches are to be a thing, they need to be as personalized as watches are, right? And so everything
as
from
a fashion item.
Yeah, everything from a Mickey Mouse watch to a Rolex to a Casio to a G-Shock. So there's the option out there. Now, will Apple make the different screen? I mean, you know, they make an iMac and they make an iPhone. I mean, they make different things. So we'll see, but
yeah, maybe they'll make a round screen iMac. I don't know. Burke says abomination was actually Megan's words. Those were her words for the round screened smartwatch.
This reminds me of Looney Tunes. What's going on right here?
See, I'm on my own watch. It's time to check in with those pesky people familiar with the matter in news that I'm pretty sure exactly 0% of people in this world could have predicted. Yik Yak, which is the anonymous social network that thrived when it launched in 2014, but then floundered and totally stalled out as it laid off 60% of its workforce last December, is apparently reportedly about to be acquired by none other than Jack Dorsey's baby. You'd be forgiven for thinking that I'm talking about Twitter, but alas, his other baby, Square, is reportedly interested in what would likely be more of an acqui-hire than a merging of technologies. But what would a merging of Square and Yik Yak actually be if we were to go that route? I don't even know. Well, that kind of scares me a little bit.
The first thing I think of is Venmo. And I got to be honest with you, I really don't like using Venmo. It's great for transferring money, but the default sharing of what money you're transferring to who being public as like a social network, that kind of drives me nuts. I love the apps that are more simple and a little bit more private, like Square Cash, like PayPal, these sorts of things. But Venmo is hugely popular, and it's a big competitor to Square Cash. And in fact, I have a few friends who, if I send them money in any other app, they just give me a bunch of gruff about it. Like they're hardcore Venmo. I've never seen so much passion around a money exchange app as I've seen with Venmo. So that's and now listen, I don't know what Square's thinking. I don't know if that's where it's all going. Yeah. But when you talk about money and you talk about social networking, that's the first thing that pops in my head.
I think you make a really good case. Now, mind you, we should say full disclosure, Square is a sponsor on the Twit network. But yeah, that's really, I hadn't even considered that aspect, but that could be right on the money. They do say that Yik Yak's app development, in this case, if it happens, and mind you, this is still just people familiar with the matter. Yeah. Maybe we'll get an announcement sometime soon about this. But app development on Yik Yak would cease. So apparently, Square's not in the interest of being in a business of an anonymous social network where people get cyberbullied all the time. So that's probably a good decision.
Probably a good decision. Probably a good decision. But yeah, with this acqui-hire, you know, like you said, they laid off like 60% of their staff last December. So hopefully they're down to that kind of core of what that team is. Yeah. I do hope though that if this all pans out and they bring it in, they keep Square Cash simple, because I really do enjoy using that app.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. Awesome. A lot of fun. Thanks for dropping in place of Megan. I guess we don't know if Megan's still not feeling well or whatever, but you might be back tomorrow. It might be Megan sitting in that seat.
We'll see. Hopefully she's feeling better. And if she's watching, we hope you get better. And turn this off and go do something else.
Yeah, exactly. If you're watching, turn it off and go to sleep. Rest up. Get some rest. TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC at twit.tv/live. You can be part of the show by emailing us, tnt@twit.tv. Leave us a short voicemail at 260-TNT-SHOW. And find us on Twitter. We're at TechNewsTodayTV.
Find all the ways to subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNT. And if you want to see us in person, please do. We always love having a live studio audience. Just email tickets@twit.tv. And if you want to tweet me, I'm on Twitter @NateOG.
And I'm at Jason Howell. Thanks to our technical director, Brian Burnett, of course. Thanks to Burke for helping out in the studio here and occasional Burke chats. Thanks to Kevin for editing the show. And thanks to you for talking tech with us today. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye, everybody. Yeah.